Circe turned a crew of armed men into pigs. For 3,000 years, that one line was all anyone remembered. The witch, the monster of the Odyssey, the woman you were taught to fear. No one ever asks the question that changes everything. What did those men row to her island to do? Start before the island, before the pigs, before anyone had a reason to be afraid of her. Circe was born in the halls of the sun. Her father was Helios, the Titan who drives the sun across the sky, and his palace burned so bright the other gods had to look away. She should have been golden, a daughter of the sun, but when Circe opened her mouth, the voice that came out was thin, human, the voice of a mortal woman in a hall full of gods. They laughed. Her sisters, her brothers, the endless bright cousins. They called her the dull one, the strange one, the one with a witch's croak, though not one of them yet knew how right they were. Speak softly, child, if you must speak at all. You have your mother's voice and none of her beauty. Try not to remind them. That was her father, the sun himself, who could not be troubled to warm his own daughter. The Circe learned to go quiet. She watched instead, and down at the roots of the world, where nobody bright ever bothered to look, she began to notice things the great gods had missed. That certain flowers, crushed at a certain hour, changed whatever they touched, that the earth was full of a power the shining gods were far too proud to kneel for. The Greeks had a word for it, pharmakia, witchcraft. Did not come from her father's blood or her mother's. It came from work, from kneeling in the dirt hour after hour, learning what each root wanted. She was the first god who ever had to earn her power. That is the flaw running under everything she does next. Circe was starving to matter, to be seen just once as something more than the disappointment at the end of the table. The first time she was truly seen, it was by a mortal, and that is where it all begins to go wrong. His name was Glaucus, a fisherman, mortal, poor, sunburned, nobody, and the first living thing that ever looked at Circe like she was worth looking at. Came to her rock at dusk with his nets empty and his stories full. She loved him the way only a lonely person can, all at once and completely. He was mortal, he would age, he would die, and Circe had just found the one thing she could not stand to lose. So she went down to the shore, to a bank of flowers she had watched do impossible things, and she made a choice she had no right to make. I can keep you. There are flowers here older than the gods. Eat, and the sea will never take you. Eat, and you will never have to leave me. Glaucus ate, and he changed. His skin went the green of deep water. His legs became the coil of a sea god, and he rose up out of the tide immortal. She had done it. She had turned a dying man into a god. It was the happiest moment of her life. It lasted about a month. Because a god does not want a fisherman's quiet love. A god wants a goddess, and Glaucus, new and shining and immortal, walked into her father's halls and lost his heart to the loveliest nymph he could find. Her name was Scylla, and she was everything Circe was not, beautiful, cruel, adored. She took one look at Circe and laughed. This little herb witch made you a god, and you came here to thank her? Oh, you poor thing, bring me something worth having, and leave the kitchen maid to her weeds. Circe stood there with her mortal voice and said nothing at all, but something in her had started to burn, and she knew now exactly what her flowers could do. Here is the part the storytellers love, the part where Circe becomes the villain. Watch closely, because it is not as simple as they make it. She did not go after Glaucus. She went after the girl. Every morning Scylla bathed in a still cove, a pool of clear water where the sea came in quiet. Circe waded into that sea at night with a handful of the worst things she had learned, and she poured them into the pool. Then she sat on the rocks to see what her jealousy would grow. The sill came down at dawn. She stepped into the water, and the water took hold of her. 6 heads tore up out of her shoulders, each one ringed with teeth, 12 groping feet, a girdle of howling dogs at her waist. The loveliest nymph in the sea became the horror that sailors still whisper about. Scylla, in the strait, who takes 6 men from every ship that dares to pass. Circe, watching from the rocks, felt the worst thing of all. Not triumph, not even guilt, not yet. Just a cold, quiet understanding of how much she could do. I meant to make her ugly, to make the outside match the rot I could already see on the inside. I did not know it would be so easy. That is the part that frightened me. This is the truth they leave out. Circe's first monster was not a man who wronged her. It was a lesson. Transformation does not invent the beast. It only drags it up where everyone can finally see it. The gods did not see a lesson. They saw a nymph with real power, and that frightened them more than any monster ever could. Nymph was meant to be decoration, pretty, harmless, forgettable. Circe had just proven that one of them, alone with dirt under her nails, could reshape the world. So the great gods did what the powerful always do to a threat they cannot control. They called it a crime, and they sent her somewhere she could never do it to any of them again. The island was called Aiaia, a green rock in an empty sea, far from every shipping lane, chosen because no one would ever have to look at her again. Meant to be a punishment. A goddess, alone forever, no feasts, no family, no one left to hear that mortal voice. It was the best thing that ever happened to her. The first time in her life, no one was watching. No one was laughing. There was only Circe and the whole green island, and all the time in the world to learn. She walked every path of it. She learned which flower stopped a heart, and which one started it, which root brought sleep, and which brought the truth. The croak they had mocked turned out to be a voice built for singing spells. The lions came first, then the wolves, down out of the hills, and they did not hunt her. They lay at her feet like house dogs and pushed their heads into her hands. People would say, later, that she had bewitched them. Maybe. Or maybe every creature that has ever been kicked simply knows one of its own and comes to the only door on the island that will open. Years went by. The frightened girl with the wrong voice was gone. What lived on Aiaia now was a witch who answered to no god, no father, no husband. Complete, dangerous, and for the first time, unafraid. Then, one gray morning, she saw a sail. She did what her people had always done for a stranger. She opened her door. Guest friendship, Zen-e, the oldest law the Greeks had. You feed the traveler, you shelter him, you ask nothing, because the gods themselves might be walking the road in rags to see who is kind. So Circe set out the long tables, cheese and barley and honey and dark wine, and the first crews came up from the beach and ate at her fire like kings. Then some of them looked around the hall. One woman, no husband, no father, no guards, just her, a great deal of gold, and no one for 100 miles to hear a sound. You already know this kind of man. Circe met him that night. She learned exactly what a certain sort of guest does the moment he decides that no one is coming to stop him. She did not scream. She did not run. She reached for the cup she had already prepared, and she smiled, and she offered them one more drink before bed. They drank, and the change took them right there at the table. The thick necks they were so proud of, the greed, the grunting appetite, it all came up to the surface where it belonged. Bristles, snouts, trotters where their grasping hands had been. Circe stood over a sty full of squealing pigs, in the wreck of the meal they had helped themselves to, and she was not sorry. Came into my house, and you showed me what you were. Fine, I only made it so the next girl who meets you can see it coming. That became the rule of the island. She fed every man who landed. She watched what he did with a woman alone and a table full of wine. The kind ones she let sail on, untouched, half of them never knowing what they had just walked past. The other kind she turned into the animal they had been playing it all along. And the world, hearing only that a witch on Aiaia made men into swine, decided that she was the danger, not them, her. Which brings us back to the gray morning, and the sail, and the one crew that would change how the whole story ended. The ship was Ith-a-kun. The men had been 10 years at Troy and wanted nothing on earth but to go home. Their captain was named Odysseus, and he was every bit as clever as she was. Split the crew and sent half to scout inland. 22 men climbed the hill and found her house in a clearing, ringed with lions and wolves that strangely did not attack. Inside, a woman sang at a great loom. The voice was low and human and lovely, and it drifted out through the open door like a hand held out in welcome. Every man there wanted to walk straight in. One did not. Eurylochus, old and careful, hung back among the trees. tame wolves. A goddess who sings for strangers. Use your heads. Everything on this island is bait, and we are the fish. I am not going in there." They laughed and went in. Circe sat them down, poured the honeyed wine, gave them welcome. And when they were full and grinning, she rose and touched each one on the shoulder with a slim, dark wand. Pigs. Every one of them she drove 21 grown men, squealing out into the sty, threw them a handful of acorns, and went back to her weaving. Eurylochus saw it through the window and ran. He reached the ship shaking, barely able to get the words out, so Odysseus took up his sword and started up the hill alone, against every word of advice, to trade his own life for his men. That should have been the end of him. It had been the end of everyone else. But on the path a young man fell into step beside him, quick and sly, with winged sandals. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, come down to break his own family's rules. She will feast you. She will drug the cup. She will tap you with that little wand and send you off to the pen with the others, unless you eat this first. Pulled a small white flower out of the hillside. Black root, milk white bloom. The gods called it moly, and they said no mortal hand could dig it up. Eat this, he said, and her drug dies in the cup. Then draw your blade and do not lower it. So, Odysseus walked into her hall and let her seat him. He ate. He drank the cup that had emptied 100 men into the sty, and Circe rose, smiling, touched the wand to his shoulder, and told him to go and join his friends. Nothing happened. He did not change. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Circe's power simply stopped, and the man she had drugged came up out of his chair with a blade already level. Whatever you just tried, it failed. Lower the wand. Turn my men back into men, or find out what I do to the god who stands between me and the last thing I have left. No mortal can resist my cup, not one in 1,000 years. Who are you? What god walks at your shoulder? She knew the answer, even as she asked it. Long ago it had been foretold to her. One day a man would come whose flesh her magic could not touch, and his name would be Odysseus. The trap she had built for every cruel man in the world had finally closed on the one man she could not turn. So she did the last thing anyone would expect. She knelt. She did not beg. Circe never begged. She made him an offer instead, the only kind that ever meant anything to her. The truth. I have turned every man who touched this shore into what he already was. You, I cannot touch. That does not make you my enemy. It might make you the only equal I have ever had. Come, let me show you what I do for the ones who are not swine. She went out to the sty and passed her hand over each bristling back, and the pigs stood up as men, taller than before, younger, as if the change had scrubbed 10 hard years off them. And for once Circe was not alone. Oh, Odysseus stayed. Not a prisoner, not a conquest, a guest who had earned the name. His men slept safe under her roof, ate at her fire, and no one turned anyone into anything. A year passed like a held breath, and it was Circe, the witch, the villain, the monster of the story, who finally set him back on the road home. 'Cause she knew the sea better than any sailor alive. She told him the thing no one wanted to hear, that to reach home, he first had to sail to the land of the dead and beg the way from a blind prophet who had died long ago. You will pass the sigh runs. Stop your men's ears with wax. You alone may listen, but have them bind you to the mast, and whatever you scream at them, tell them now to only pull it tighter. Then she had to tell him about the strait. 2 cliffs close together. Under one, a whirlpool that swallows whole ships. On the other, high in the rock, a cave, and in the cave, 6 heads, 12 feet, a ring of teeth in every mouth. Scylla, the girl she had poisoned in a quiet pool a lifetime ago, still there, still hungry. And Circe had to look the man she was starting to love in the eye and tell him the truth about her oldest sin. There is no clever trick for this one. You cannot fight her. You will lose 6 men in the time it takes to row past. And you will row past anyway, because the other side is worse. Do not stop. Do not turn back for them. Grieve later. She had made that monster in a jealous rage, and now it would take 6 of the men sleeping under her roof, and not one spell in all her craft could unmake it. That was the price. Come due at last. Some things you transform, you never get to change back. But think about who the villain of this story actually is. Gods took a girl with the wrong voice and mocked her until she went looking in the dirt for something of her own. When she found it, They called her a criminal and threw her away. The men who came to her island came armed, to a woman living alone, and reached for what was not theirs. She turned them into the shape that fit. The whole long story, Circe never once turned anyone into something they were not already. The pig was always there, inside the man. She just took away his ability to hide it. That is why they had to make her the monster. Not because she lied about anyone. Because she told the truth about everyone, and there is nothing the powerful fear more than a mirror. She paid for it with the only thing she had left to spend. Time, century after century, alone on a green rock, the price of being the one god who made you look at yourself. History called her the villain. History was written by the pigs. So what did those men row to her island to do? Now you know, and now you get to decide what she was. The monster who turned innocent sailors into pigs. Or the only honest god in the whole Odyssey, who simply refused to pretend. Tell me down in the comments, if you had washed up on Aiaia, would you have walked out a man or a pig? Be honest, she would know. Every week I dig up another god the history books buried and tell you what really happened. Subscribe and you will not miss the next one. Cause the next name on this channel could turn a grown man to stone with nothing but a look. And she never once asked for the power that ruined her. You know her face. You do not know her story. I will see you there.